All right, welcome back. The title of this mini lecture is The Belle Epoque, a short introduction. So let's get into it. So we're going to talk about 5 terms that as you read about this and learn more about it, it's good to kind of consider the broader context of this time period. So the Belle Epoque often will refer to, so if historians are writing about it or other scholars are writing about it, they're referring to this kind of period, really sort of the generation prior to the First World War in Europe and more broadly globally. The view necessarily with this is the idea that the time essentially was, you know, World War One is really bad, and so of course, and it lasts a long time, and so the feeling is sort of this was the nice time before the really bad time. Now, it's not perfect. The Belle Epoque has a lot of problems. There's a lot of difficulties here. Now, do you have, a good term for us would be cafe culture, right? Do you have in places like Paris these cafes, which are these seats of intellectual kind of discussion that are going on? Yes. Do you also have wide discussions or use of questions about alcoholism at this time? Yes. And drug use at this time? Yes. So you do have this cafe culture. Do you have very interesting and engaging art? Yes, absolutely. But do you also have a period of political anarchism in some cases, where there's a lot of conflict necessarily going on? Yes, you also have that. So you get your cafe culture, you've got issues related to alcoholism and other, you've got issues of political conflict or violence. That is certainly going to be a part of the Belle Epoque. One other element to emphasize with this is immigration and migration. So during this particular period, you will see sort of very high rates of immigration and migration occurring. And so part of the experience for many individuals, across European communities and even into American communities and communities across the Americas is, of course, immigration and migration. So, for example, about as many individuals in the late 1800s, early 1900s who come from Italy to the U.S., about the same number will go to Argentina. So it's important for us to recognize not only the effect that immigration and migration has on communities in places like Europe, but also the effect it has, of course, on the creation of new communities and identities for individuals experiencing this process, whether they're coming through Ellis Island or other. So Angel Island was another place, of course. This is early 20th century in San Francisco. But that process of being a migrant or an immigrant, is something that many are experiencing during this period. Now, the First World War is going to close off opportunities for many individuals with that kind of thing, because, of course, Italy will later be involved in the war and that reality. But the immigration or migration experience is something, that is certainly going on here. In terms of other elements or other things for us to kind of be mindful of, in politics, certainly in Europe, across Europe, you're going to see, especially in the UK, efforts at suffrage, efforts at the support of women's suffrage. And you're also seeing, the support of tactics that would be deemed perhaps violent, but you're also seeing the responses on the part of the state that is deemed quite violent as well. The force feeding with hunger strikes and this kind of thing would eventually occur. Now, some of this, a moratorium is put on some of this during the duration of the war, but in the period of the late 1800s, early 1900s, if you're living in the UK especially, you're going to be aware of individuals like Emmeline Pankhurst and others who are going to be actively involved in this particular reality. Another sort of element for us to mention here is you're certainly going to see, a number of different, again, political ideologies that are going to be a part of, kind of this Belle Epoque era, and other forms of biases that are going to be aware of this Belle Epoque era. You're certainly going to see support and the development of what is referred to often as Zionism. And then you're also going to see rises in France specifically, there's where some of this work is at. In anti-Semitism, particularly the case of Dreyfus, who was this French, this military officer. So, on one side, you do have, right, sort of the travel is different. The process is different. Cafe culture, you've got this kind of stuff. The art is different. So you're moving from Impressionism into Post-Impressionism, right? Sort of this kind of thing. You're seeing great gains this way. And you're seeing a new industrialization, which, has positive effects, certainly, in certain kinds of technologies, but it also can have a negative effect in terms of certain kinds of effects on communities, right? The ubiquity of rail lines in the late 19th century, early 20th century would definitively, of course, have an effect across Europe and the US in terms of the manner in which communities are being altered and transformed. That's going to have an effect, of course, on the cultural life of many individuals. So the Belle Epoque, of course, this beautiful time, there's positives, supposedly, there's also negatives. So there's a lot that's going on here, of course, on the eve of the First World War, which began in 1914. Thank you.